Well, I'm excited to be here with David Tal, and I saw an interview that you did with Pastor Rawl a few weeks ago, but also you have been a tour guide for Pastor Rawl many ministries as going to the nation of Israel. And I want to talk about a lot of stuff, obviously the state of Israel right now, but for our viewers and the listeners right now, let's recount a little bit. October 7th, 2023 will go down in history as a horrible catastrophe. It's been echoed that from the level of Holocaust is only second this is only second in comparison to the Holocaust. Break down the severity of what took place.
Well, I think it was the American president after Pearl Harbor who said it would be a day of infamy, and I think for us, we're on that kind of event. It has changed us as a people. And when I mean a people, I mean not only the Israelis, I mean the whole Jewish people have changed after October 11. The surprise and the downright atrocity of the attack, meaning it wasn't just a military attack that we've kind of dealt with in the past. There were events and things that were perpetrated there that were meant to be scary, mind-boggling, horrific in that way. And all of a sudden we realize that, and maybe this is something we need to talk about, we realize that there's evil in the world. Clear, deep, unadulterated evil. And what we saw there is evil. So we're surprised. We're overwhelmed by the evil. Israel is now, on one hand, licking its wounds and binding its wounds, and we've got people that are being, taken care of. We've got whole populations that have been moved out of their homes because of the fighting, and we've gone on the offensive. So we've mobilized our units, we've trained them, equipped them, and the fighting now is inside Gaza, literally in the middle of Gaza City. And while all of this is happening, one of the aspects that I don't hear people talking about and connecting to is the hostages. They grabbed women by their hair and literally dragged them back into Gaza. They loaded grandmas on the back of motorcycles and took them back to Gaza. And they carried 6-month-old babies in their arms and took them back to Gaza. And we have 250 of our families, men, women, children, not soldiers, men, women, children, that are hostages somewhere in the tunnels of Gaza. We haven't heard a word about them. We haven't heard any sign of life. And so what happened on October 7th, what has resulted and what's happening now to a certain extent, and maybe we can go into depth, I think is deeply changing the Jewish people.
Yeah. One thing that you said, and I told you this before we got started, is that the importance of emphasizing this major attack that took place in Israel. Because right now, people will say, oh man, that's horrible, the atrocity. But now when there is a response by Israel, then the narrative is going to begin to change. And we saw that within a week or 2 weeks. And then it's obviously grown. When you see that reality come to pass, how did you foresee that? I mean, is that just something that you knew was going to happen?
Well, let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, we're Israelis, but we're Jews. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, Judaism is both a religion, a nationality, and a race. I mean, we're all of that together. And we have a long history of people hating the Jewish people. I mean, we're not surprised that people hate us. We have a long history of lies being perpetrated about us. We have a long history of people killing us because we're Jews, which was basically the event of October. So we're not surprised that the world has taken the other side. And one of the things that always amazes me in the hypocrisy, I'm military. I know what's going on in the Middle East. You know what's going on in the Middle East. Anybody who knows anything knows that, for instance, 500,000 people were killed by the Syrian regime in the last 2 years. You don't see people in the streets. You don't hear people crying. You don't hear the demonstrations. You're not hearing. I mean, he's literally used chemical weapons on his own population in Damascus, on Palestinian refugee camps in Damascus. Where was the outcry? And the fact that there wasn't an outcry then, and there is an outcry now, and our psychic and our, historical memory means that we're back in the deepest, darkest annals of humanity, and one of the darkest places of humanity. And since I am in a church, in a Calvary Chapel church or Bible reading, the deepest and darkest annals of humanity have always had something to do with God's chosen people. And we are starting to re-tie that together. I think that's what Bible reading, God fearing people in the world have to start to understand, that this is a God's chosen people event and not just another story that's happening on the history of the world.
No, I think that's very important. And for myself is, I've been walking with the Lord now for 18, 19 years. And obviously Calvary Chapel has a heavy emphasis on the Word of God. When I look at the Old Testament, I love the Old Testament. I love the life of Abraham. He's one of my favorite characters to study, and I'm just like blown away by just his journey, the ups, the downs, the lapses of faith, but also the promises in spite of himself. Abraham wasn't a perfect man, but that promise in Genesis chapter 12 and God's faithfulness for his people through all that you just talked about, all the oppression from Egypt, and then later on with the Babylons and the Medes and the Persians and obviously the Romans, all of the stuff that the nation of Israel, the Jewish people, have endured all the way up to, go ahead.
All the way up to the Holocaust. I
Yes,
mean,
I was about to say, yes.
worst example. And again, people ask me, are you surprised that this happened? No, I'm not surprised that people want to kill me because I'm Jewish. I'm not surprised that people put together horrific lies about me because I'm Jewish. Because, again, I have that in my DNA. I mean, that's part of what I grew up with. But what I am surprised sometimes is that people who do consider themselves rational, reasonable, progressive, leftist, liberal, all of these things are siding with terrible, terrible hatred and terrible, terrible evil. I mean, what was perpetrated in Beirut on that morning is evil in a biblical sense, if you want to put it, in Tarantino terms. It's that kind of evil. And how can rational people align themselves and connect to that? The fact that they can, to us in our mind, I think speaks volumes about the war on something deeper that is going on. And the way I like to kind of put it together is, as much as anything else, there's an actual war going on the concept of truth. There's a war on truth. And we've seen battles on the war on truth in American society, the whole identity things. I mean, a child can decide what his gender is. I mean, he has his own truth. It's his truth. It's not what is real. And when you kind of step out of it, and I get to see the American part from the other side, you see that something weird is happening on trying to disassociate the reality from the concept of truth. The Bible mentions the word truth 333 times. I checked it up. It's amazing. The Bible talks about truth over and over, Old Testament. And when Jesus actually walks the land, he actually embodies himself in truth. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So if Jesus is truth, what is the deceiver going to do in order to fight against Jesus, against God, and God's chosen people? He is going to fade, dissolve, eradicate the concept of truth, where everything becomes relative. Everything can be maybe a little bit truth, maybe a little bit lie. And if there's no such thing as truth, the deceiver can take this wherever he wants. And what I'm trying to say is the fact that I'm watching the truth being eroded so completely and so quickly and thrown out, the window, means that the deceiver is working overtime right now. And I think more than anything, I think that's what the people have to receive. What's happening with God's chosen people right now is one thing. What's happening with godliness and truthfulness is a different war. And I think the two wars are together, and it's time to stand up.
No, I think what you just said right now is profound and true. We have seen it in our school systems and the higher education over the last 5-10 years, definitely longer than that. It was already, but we're kind of seeing the results of it. And you're bringing up truth, subjective truth versus objective, absolute truth. And subjective truth has taken this priority. My truth is but is on these different levels. My opinion actually outweighs what you perceive truth to be. And we see it in so many platforms. You just said it, like the sexuality thing. That thing has gone like fast paced in the last couple of years as a high level. And the result of it is it destroys the fabric of the foundation of truth. It's destroying a family unit. It's telling a kid that's just battling with just emotions and different feelings and stuff like that, being bombarded with all this kind of information that causes them to doubt truth of being a boy, being a girl. Oh, I have the ability to change if I don't feel good inside, and therefore fast forwarding them, well, then make this decision, get this procedure, take this medication, all by trying to satisfy an emotion. But again, it's not based upon absolute truth, and then you're left wanting.
Yeah, and again, in an environment where truth doesn't matter, there's no absolute truth. So, okay, the first thing if somebody says something, first thing you ask is, okay, why are you saying that? I mean, there can be truth. The truth can be disassociated from whoever is speaking the truth. And that disassociation means everything is a power struggle. I mean, it's all about who is saying what because he's saying this. So people spread a lie. I mean, how many times have I heard this in the last week? Israel is genociding the Palestinians.
Yeah.
It's a lie. There's no truth in that. It's very easy to debunk that because more Palestinians are alive today than have ever been in the past. I mean, if we're trying to pull off a genocide, we're doing a very bad job at genociding.
Right.
Okay, the Palestinians in Israel are very prosperous. I mean, it is definitely a lie. But again, you can't come and say it's a lie because what is actually happening in reality doesn't matter. What people feel is happening becomes more important. And what we have done in a bigger way, we have made ourselves into gods. God made me a woman, but my truth is I'm a man, and my truth supersedes God's truth. God gave this country to Israel, okay, but I've decided it's not. God made a promise to the Jewish people. I decided that they're not a chosen people. So my truth supersedes because my emotional truth, and this is a new one that we're hearing again and again, is more important than the reality and the facts on the ground. Now, if there's no truth, nothing can be right and wrong. Nothing can be total. And again, that's why the way I see it is God is truth. And it's not only I see it, the Bible actually said God is truth. So if you erode the concept, the idea, the philosophy of objective truth, you're actually eroding God's footprint, fingerprint, handprint in what's going on in the world. And I think that's the battle that's being fought right now.
Yeah, and this is why people need to really research. They need to know. They need to seek. Jesus says, seek and you will find, knock and the door would be open. Because what we are seeing is this battle of perception, where perception oftentimes wins out truth in the grand scheme of things in our society because of media. So I'll give you an example. Like, I'm not a big Twitter person. I use Instagram, Facebook a little bit, but Twitter has always been known to having trending topics. So, and I know it's changed to X or whatever, but when this went down, I just happened to look into the Twitter, and first trending, Israel under attack, October 7th, some massacre. That was about 2 days, 3 days. 4 days or 5 days later, it was Free Palestine. It was Gaza under attack. It was all these negative connotations, and with them, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands, videos, things, links, all of it blurring reality and just shit, like just coming against Israel and making them out to look so bad and evil, and people eat it up.
So one of the things that we're dealing with in the media world is the truth of the masses. Okay? What does it matter if it's true or not? If whoever says it has 1 million followers, that gives it truthfulness. We are Christians.
Yep.
We know that majority of people are sinners. We know that all of us are fallen. We know that all of us are evil. We need to connect to truthfulness in order to throw off this evil nature. This is by concept we are. So when you say that if everybody agrees to this, this is the right thing, that's unbiblical in the most profound sense. The agreement of everybody doesn't mean that's right. Moses comes off the mountain with the tablets that changed the world, and most of the people were dancing around the golden calf. Now, does that make the golden calf the true God because Moses was one and they were many? I mean, the truth of the masses is what's being eroded here. And I believe, again, like in other places, God's chosen people are the canary in the coal mine. I mean, what's happening to us is an illustration of what's happening in a bigger sense. For better or for worse, we're not always right. We're sinful people. We do things wrong, just like everybody else. But we are God's chosen people. The way I used to illustrate it is we're GKs. We're God's kids. Just like a pastor has a family, and they're not always the PKs. They're not always right. They're not always the best. But they will always be the family of God. They will always be the family of the pastor. But sometimes when the enemy wants to attack a pastor, he'll attack his children. When the enemy wants to attack God, he'll attack God's kids. Not because we're the best, not because we're the most, but we do have a connection. We are the apple of God's eyes. So if you poke a finger at us, you're poking a finger at God. So this battle is much more than just the Jewish people. But we are suffering, by the way, and we're back in a place that we know very well, and God's people are bleeding right now. And maybe what I would like to convey to the people who are listening to this is that more than ever right now, God's people need the support of the Christian church. We need the support of God's adopted family, which is definitely part of the family, to stand up and say, one, we actually support the truth. We will not be derailed by the deceiver. And two, we realize that God's people have a role to play and to support. And when I mean support, I mean, we could talk about financial support, but I think that's less important. I would talk more about political support, because the politics are playing a role in what's going on the ground in Israel. But I'm going to say something I think it's really important for most Christians to hear. We need spiritual support right now. Just like when somebody in your family is gone through a terrible accident or a terrible ordeal, and yes, you're going to go and you're going to wrap his wounds and you're going to go and going to make dinner for him. But as Christians, the first thing that we need to do is get on our knees and pray and support. And I think that is as important as anything else.
You know, one thing that just broke my heart, and this is from my perspective, I've lived in Southern California my whole life, and I have a fondness for Israel. I've visited twice, and both trips, my first year I came to the Lord, changed my life. I have stories from that, and the second trip as well. And raising my children in the ways of the Lord, I have 3 sons. I have a 14-year-old, I have a 13-year-old, and I have a 9-year-old. And when all this went down, you know, we prayed for Israel and continue to pray every day as a family. And a few days went by, and me and my wife were talking. We were talking about Schindler's List, and we were talking about the Holocaust and teaching my children, like, the lessons. Like, my kids had lessons. I gave them, like, an overview of what I kind of talked about in the beginning, the Old Testament from Genesis all the way through, what the nation has gone through, and them coming back into the land in 1948, and prior to that of the Nazis and all that took place. Like, we kind of educated our children, especially my older one, on the Schindler's List interpretation and the Holocaust itself and that reality and that deception. And then looking at our world today, the anti-Semitism, because we're talking about truth. The truth is, this is everywhere. Like, how can you not see it right before you? When I'm looking at photos, videos, marches, it's not just like in this free Palestine and for the people that are in Gaza. It is anti-Jew. Yeah. It is anti-Israel. And it's a battle of, you nailed it, because we see this in other spectrums as well. It's not just on the political realm, it's left, it's right, it's Republican, it's Democrat. There's a battle between good and evil.
Yeah. One of the fascinating aspects, I think, of what's going on. Listen, I grew up in the church. I grew up in the church in Israel and grew up in the church here. Sometimes the church becomes Sunday school for us as kids, and you come and you sit down in a sermon, and it's about these spiritual things, and it's up there, and it's all how we feel and how we should live, and what I think has happened in Israel on Black Saturday, what we call, is that the world hooked up with the biblical narrative. And all of a sudden, the concept of evil that you talk about in Sunday school or you talk about from the pulpit, now you see it on the ground. You see it actually being perpetrated in the world. You see how an environment of evil can create a dynamic that creates the kind of terrible, terrible atrocities that we see. And you see it on the ground. It's not historical. It's not a documentary channel. And it's not VeggieTales. I mean, there is evil in the world. All of a sudden, you see that it's a job that we have to fight that evil physically in the ground. Okay, there is evil. There is godliness. If I am on God's army, what am I supposed to do? How do I fight this evil? There is God's chosen people. And we've seen again and again in the history how God's chosen people have paid a price for who they are. They've been persecuted. Okay, we've heard about it. We've heard about the Holocaust. Here we are again. Here you see. Now, what I'm trying to say, it's making real the world of good and bad, truth and deception that we've been reading about and teaching about. Now it's on the ground. Show your kids what evil actually is. And then I'm going to say something else, because if where we're going with this continues, the people that are on the side of God, godliness, truth, right, okay, are going to find themselves persecuted by the ones who are on the other side. And in a weird sense, and this is kind of weird to put it together, I grew up as a Christian in a Jewish environment, and I was persecuted for being a Christian. I'm one of the few people that that actually grew up being persecuted for being a Christian. But what I'm trying to say is, first of all, it makes you stronger. And second of all, you get to decipher, distinct what is right and what is wrong. You don't come to church just because everybody comes to church.
Right.
You have to pay a price for it. What I'm trying to say is prepare your children, prepare your churches, prepare the environment to be persecuted. Because if this continues the way I see, where truthfulness and godliness and Christianity, which represents all of these, is going to become a bad cuss word for all the ones who see it on the other side, then your children are going to be persecuted in a way that you never were. And your grandchildren are going to be persecuted for being Christian in a way. And now, I don't know if we're going to be thrown to lions again, but being ostracized on social media can be a very hard, and we need to prepare the people that do stand on the side of truth and godliness how to deal with not being accepted, not being liked, not being loved, not being shared by the people who don't.
It's interesting that you bring that up, and I feel it's so important. I've been thinking about it as well. When we look at what the nation of Israel has gone through and the Jewish people, and it is the passionate hate and animosity is more than just flesh and blood. It just is. There's a warfare that's there. And the perception of the Christian community as, well, there's an undercurrent, right? So people disregard many of the biblical principles of the Word of God. And right now it might just be in debate and just, oh, that's old school or whatever. But there is an appetite going against it. Right now in the United States of America, we just have a new Speaker of the House. And his thing, he's a Christian. He even said in a statement, he has a biblical worldview. And the one that was one of the press secretaries, Jen Psaki, I think she's a commentator now who was for Biden, she painted this picture like how scary it is. This guy actually believes the Bible, and he thinks it has the answers to life and society and stuff like that, and made it seem like so old school and so negative that you just see how that undercurrent can continue to develop. It's already there. It's growing an appetite towards that, just like you're saying.
So here's a weird question. In the environment or in a culture that kind of waves the flag of multiculturalism and multi-racism and multi-religionism, if you want to put it that way, where our strength is in our diversity, How is it, and what I'm seeing from my side is that you, how do you say, wave the flag of the other minorities, and the Christian majority has not being accepted in your environment. I was speaking at a church in Denver a couple of years ago, and I was, with pastors and deacons, and where they were saying that they're being persecuted. Their Christianity, they're being persecuted. They're not allowed to say God. You can't say Jesus on TV anymore. I mean, it's become a cuss word. You actually have to sign before you go on some of the networks that you're not going to mention Jesus. And one of the pastor's wives was a teacher in an elementary school, and I still remember this was a wake-up moment for me, because she says, listen, I've got three Muslim girls in my class, and they wear the hijab, they're Muslim, and I'm responsible to make sure that they adhere to their religion. Make sure that these little girls don't take off their hijab. Make sure that they eat their sandwiches and don't eat a sandwich from somebody else, which is not the correct way of food. Give them time to make. It's my role to make sure that they adhere to their religion. But if I close my eyes and thank Jesus for my peanut butter and jelly sandwich before I have lunch, I get in trouble with my principal.
Unreal.
And what I'm trying to say is, this culture in the States is bringing up Satanism and Islam and different other ones in the name of diversity. Drag has become normal, and LGBTQ alphabet people have become acceptable. And if all of that is becoming acceptable, why not accept a Christian who believes in Jesus, who follows the Bible? And the fact that all of those are acceptable, and that biblical Christianity is not acceptable in the United States of America, means that America has moved away from the godliness and the truthfulness that it was created on. Because your founding fathers might not have all been born-again Christians, but definitely had Christian values, Judeo-Christian ethics embedded in your foundation, okay? America is moving away from that, moving away from his Christianity. And what I realized from that little event in Denver is that me and my country are fighting for our legitimacy the way that you in Christianity are fighting for your legitimacy. We're fighting the same enemy.
Yeah.
And it's time to stand up.
Just to hit home this point even a little bit more, I know I've been tracking all that, what I can consume on information of what's taking place over there. And I saw that one thing that, because of this narrative of people almost questioning, people here on the streets, oh, they didn't kill babies, they didn't do this, this is a lie. And there's some people that don't believe the Holocaust exists. It's like you say something long enough and you have more people buy into it, for some reason you start believing it. But what they did was, many media reporters and those that are there were given videos and photos of the actual massacre, and you saw photos of these journalists, and I know they've had a couple different platforms where they're weeping, they're crying, the reality of evil is right before them, and they're speechless.
Again, you can lie about anything, you can deceive about anything, and again, I can't help. I mean, it gives me goosebumps when I say it, and maybe I'm getting in trouble with somebody, but it's not by chance that he's called the deceiver.
Yep.
That's what he does. And if Jesus is truth, what is the Satan going to do? He's going to deceive and he's going to lie. And the way that the lies are being perpetrated, Israel occupied the territory. I mean, it's very easy to look into historically. It's not true. And again, but if people want to believe the lie, and here's the problem, if they accept the lie as a truth, you can't really change them with the truth. If somebody decides I was born a woman, but I am now a man, I mean, and you can explain about chromosomes and explain about genetics and explain about whatever, but he has already decided that that's his truth, okay? You cannot bring truth in order to change his mind. The only thing that you can bring, and I'm going to say this in a weird way, is the Holy Spirit. That's the only thing that's going to convince
I agree.
him. I mean, nothing else. And what I'm going to say, maybe in this connection to us, we are in a very bad place right now. And yes, Israel needs the support of our Christian brothers and sisters all over the world. And yes, we need financial support because we're going through a terrible financial crisis. I mean, our economy is closed down.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a tour guide, and I don't know when I'm going to be seeing any kind of income in the near future. So there's that. We need your political support. The United States of America is putting right now pressure on Israel to stop trying to root out the Hamas, to call for a ceasefire, because it makes good sense for the people that Biden wants to elect him next time to call for a ceasefire. But if we don't take Hamas down and leave Hamas standing, it's just going to be a matter of time before they're going to cross over the border again. So Israel has to root out the Hamas. We have to do this no matter what. But your president and your administration is already putting pressure as a result of all the people who have been demonstrating in the streets. So we need your political pressure. We need your political support. Your administration needs to know that Bible-reading, God-fearing Christians are on this side of this debate and supporting Israel. They need to know that because that has political ramifications. But again and again, I'm going to say this again and again. More than anything, we need your spiritual support. We need people praying for us. We need people reaching out. We need, and I've said this on the tour bus many times, the fact that Christians come over to Israel, not only do they tour the land and enjoy the sights and see everything, but they come and show my people that there are Christians who actually love and support us. And right now, Israel, the Jewish people, wherever they are, need to know that there are Christians who actually love us. And that, I think, is the most important thing.
You know, I could probably talk to you all day, but we'll wrap up here in a few moments. I want to hit on a couple things that maybe you can paint this picture. I told you before we went live is we have a friend that lives in Israel. She's lived there for over 20 years. She's married, loves her husband, her children, and let's talk about the reality of what the community is facing, the moms, the dads, like your day-to-day life has changed. Like, what's the atmosphere in Israel?
Well, there's, like everything else in Israel, there's two main aspects to this. One is that we're still licking our wounds. Everybody in Israel knows somebody who was killed in October 7th. Almost all of us know somebody who's a hostage. It's a small enough country that we have all of this interconnected, so that's a personal sense of hurt, if you want to put it that way. On the other hand, we've gone into war mode. The only reason I'm not in uniform is because my belly's gotten too big and the wrinkles around my eyes are a little bit too deep. But what I'm trying to say is everybody I know that's between the age of let's say, 19 and 45 is in uniform. And a lot of us are actually inside. I've got two nephews that are inside Gaza with bullets whizzing over their heads right now. And my phone is right next to me, and I'm freaked out that I'm going to get a message from my brother saying that something happened to Johnny. I mean, that is the way. I'm freaked out that somebody's going to call me and say, this and this that you know was killed. And that is how we feel. And then I will add on one more level. I saw a movie. I mean, I left a young couple in my apartment when I left, and they're kind of getting away. So they filmed the rockets going over my house in Modi'in 2 nights ago. We're still in the battle, right now. And then Israel now is starting to wake up to, wait a minute, where's the world? Where's this liberal world? Where's this God-fearing world? Where's this Christian world? Where's this world that realizes and saw what happened, opened up the camps in the Holocaust? Where are the ones who took out Nazi Germany that are now yelling at us for taking out Hamas? I mean, where is this? And we are replugging ourselves into this feeling of we're being persecuted again.
You know, like I said, I think I could be here all day with you, but I do want to bring up another thing for us, the Westerners, United States of America, the mindset, because I think this is the hurdle that people have a problem with, because they just look at them as, oh, these poor people in Gaza, or we see this, but like, talk about the mindset. Pastor Dale, many years ago, talked about being with one of the tour guides back in the day, and what he said to Dale was like, you guys don't know how to deal with terrorists, because you can't negotiate with them, right? And he's like, this is how you negotiate with a terrorist. You put them up against the wall. You put a gun at them. If you move, I shoot. Like, there's in our mindset, we're thinking we could do this diplomatic way of being able to fix a situation. Why can't you guys just talk it out and work it out? And that's the mindset of the Westerners. So they can't fully grasp this reality that the heart of the people here, the Arab people, the Palestinian people, would want to wipe out Israel. Iran has said it from the face of the earth. That's
Hamas
reality.
has said it. Okay, open up Article 11 of the Hamas Charter, meaning the Hamas is the organization that we're dealing with. Google it. Article 11, the Charter of the Hamas says we cannot compromise, we will not give any piece of land. They don't want to sit down and negotiate an agreement. If they had wanted to, they could have done that in 1935, 1947, 1948, 1967, 2009, 2011. I mean, there were many, many times where Israel tried to reach an agreement. They don't want an agreement. They want us dead. Now, if you have a neighbor and you're arguing about where the fence is going to be on between your yard and his, you can have an argument, you go to a lawyer, you're fine. But if you have an argument with your neighbor, and it's not about where the fence is, it's not about how big your yard should be and his yard should be, it's about you living on that hill. It's about you living at all. And if your neighbor is not arguing about the fence, but he's shooting out of his window into your bedroom, there's no negotiation that you can have with somebody who wants to kill you. I mean, that's not negotiable. You don't. And if he says he wants to kill you, why not take him for his value? We allowed ourselves to be hoodwinked into this, and on October 6th, we were feeling that we were reaching some kind of an agreement. We now realize that our enemy wants to kill us, not to reach an agreement, not to change the political situation, not to reach an arrangement, to literally kill us. He killed babies. He raped our women. He kidnapped our grandmas. That's not a negotiable stance that you can negotiate about. That's something that needs to be, and I'm hoping that all of you who have children, and think about what would happen if somebody broke into your house, okay, raped your wife, and grabbed your children and took them off into a neighborhood somewhere. What would nothing would stand between you and that. Nothing. I mean, the wrath of God would be coming down on somebody who did that to you. And you can justify it no matter how you want. Oh, you didn't talk to him yesterday nice. Or, oh, you left the door unlocked and that's how he got in. All of that might be true. But that doesn't justify. And if it was your women and children, if it was your grandma, 82 years old, being held hostage in the dungeon in Gaza, what would you do?
Yeah, no, for sure. We have to realize, and I know you've pointed this out before, what took place at October 7th, 2023, over 1,400 people were murdered, correct?
Murdered.
Over a couple hundred, 200 to
50.
almost 300, 250, 260 have been captured, hostages right now. If you put that number in comparison, because the nation of Israel, it's been said the size of it is like the size of New Jersey in population. If you looked at even the United States of America, it would be as if 30 to 40,000 people right here in Southern California were murdered, kidnapped,
Brutally
murdered,
terrible.
sliced, burned, sliced up, and then I've heard of the cruel things of killing a wife and children or chopping off body parts right in front of the husband where her husband is not able to do anything about it because he's tied up and then they kill him. If that happened here, what would the United States of America response be, as you kind of pinned it even to myself or anybody that is a man that loves his family? What would the response be? Like, that's the reality of what we're facing.
And now they're saying ceasefire. Right. Slow down. Be nice. No, and I don't think anybody realizes Israel has to finish this. Israel has to finish this on three different levels. One, we need to make sure that there's not going to be a threat like this on the other side of our border ever again. Two, we need to tell everybody in the area, Hezbollah, Iran, Syria, you can't do anything like this to us and live to tell the tale. And three, the world needs to know that terrorism doesn't work.
Yeah.
And if we fail to make this statement, and they're just going to come for you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a matter of time.
In closing, David, just a few things. I like what you said about the importance of understanding truth. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus, when he was questioned about the last days, the first thing he says is, "Be ye not deceived." Deception is real. You're talking about your heart, too, of education. I would say, for those that are listening, make sure you educate yourself when you're talking about the land of Israel and understand the promise that was given to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and to the forefathers. And the reality of Israel just even being in existence today is a miracle of God. And God's faithfulness and understanding the word of God, that God is not done with Israel, is not done with his people. As you have said, yeah, Israel and themselves are people just like you and I were been disobedient, have been disciplined as we discipline our children as well. But God, as we wouldn't give up on our children, God still has a plan for the nation of Israel. Share with those who can. I know you have a YouTube, you have other kinds of resources and information. Highlight that for our listeners.
Well, let's start off. First, you got to be careful where you get your information from. I have a YouTube channel called The Balagan Connection, Balagan, The Balagan Connection, and I've been posting my understanding of things that are happening on a different level. Educate yourselves, and again, I know Pastor Raul Reese. I know his connection to Israel. I know he's been teaching this church who and what Israel is. I know Pastor Chuck Smith has ingrained that. Don't let that go. And I'm sitting here in a pastor's conference, and I'm trying to say, I think one of the things that needs to be stressed for the younger pastor, the new generation that is coming in, Israel is still part of the story. And the emphasis that Pastor Raul and Jeff Johnson and other pastors that I know had on the story of Israel, continue that into the next generation. That needs to be pushed into the next generation. Educate yourself about what's going on. Be careful who you understand or who you take your information. Connect to the Balagan Connection. I've been posting things both on Instagram and on YouTube. David Tal on Facebook would also be. And me and others that are doing things like this. And make sure you get the right, the clear, and I'm going to say even more than that, the biblical events truthfully before you make a decision about what to back. And yes, Paul said it very clearly, you owe the Jewish people. Christians are grafted in. Without the Jews, Jesus would not have come. And without the Jews, there's no end times. And if the deceiver, if the Satan is trying to get at the Jews, that means he's trying to mess up God's plan for what's going to happen. So make sure you know what you're getting. And yes, Balagan Connection, check it out.
David, thanks for taking the time. And for all those that are listening right now, we strongly encourage you, continue to pray for Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We are called throughout Scripture from the promise in Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. It says to the land that was given to Abraham, that we are to bless them. And if we curse them, if we come against them, we will be cursed. And so important for us to recognize the promise that came to Abraham, that through your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. We are the recipients of the blessings and the promises of God through the nation of Israel. And continue to educate yourself and continue to pray for Israel. Thank you guys for tuning in.